And yes, it's still Friday. Anything goes Friday. Yes, we have 5 police officers dead in Texas and 7 others wounded. A terrible tragedy. We also have 2 African Americans who have apparently been executed by police in the last 3 days. Serious problems and serious times in our country. And we'll get back to our conversation about that with your calls and my thoughts on it in just a moment. But there are other things going on, and we can't chew gum and walk at the same time in this country and on this show. And one of the more important things that I think is going on, we've been talking throughout the day, in fact, about the corrupting influence of money on politics. And in fact, I started out my whole rant on what happened in Texas by taking us back to Richard Nixon starting the drug war as a political stunt to get himself elected at a time in 1968 when more Americans died from choking on food or from falling downstairs than died from illegal drugs. Nixon changed that, and that opened the door to an enormous flood of money into police departments and all kinds of other things, which has corrupted, in my opinion, a lot of things. Well, there's other kinds of corruption, and in this case, this has to do with our food supply. And I am super happy to have in the studio with me, usually she's on my TV show in the evening, Patty Lovera, the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch. Foodandwaterwatch.org is the website. Patty, welcome.
Thanks. Hi.
Great to have you here with us. You can tweet her at Food and Water, A-N-D, and it's Food and A-N-D, waterwatch.org is the website. Vermont spent years having hearings, having witnesses, having both the industry and consumers come before their legislature and worked out a GMO labeling law that went into effect 8 days ago on July 1st. Am I right so far, Patty?
All correct.
Okay. And so, and a number of companies, Campbell Soup, I guess, is probably the most prominent, have actually started labeling GMOs on their foods, probably in response to the Vermont law.
Absolutely. Actually, big names. I went shopping 2 weeks ago here in D.C. and in suburban Maryland, and I bought M&Ms and Quaker oatmeal and Nature Valley granola bars and various sodas. And they all had GMO labels on them because they were getting ready for Vermont, and they were shipping it elsewhere besides Vermont with the label on there. Yeah, I mean,
when I grew up, it was university area. It was Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture.
Exactly.
In the 50s and 60s. It's But this isn't good enough for the GMO folks. The GMO folks are very unhappy about this. Tell me about this.
Oh, they've been unhappy. So there have been states that have tried to do this through the ballot initiative process, and several of them have come this close, hundreds of votes out of the whole state. It was the last one in Oregon came this close. The places that have passed mandatory labeling laws have been in the legislature, and Vermont's went into effect first. The industry has spent. It's getting hard to count it all, but between food processing companies and biotechnology companies like Monsanto that make the GMOs together, they've spent, we think, up to $100 million just in fighting these state laws between the ballot initiatives, what they're spending now to make them go away. And it's absurd because these companies label all over the world in 64 other countries. They're subject to mandatory labeling laws, and they comply with them. They sell food in those countries. But they really, really, really don't want to be regulated, and they really don't want a big market like the U.S. They don't want people to have this information on their food.
So I saw this tweet yesterday. Stop TPP Now tweeted it out. And it has pictures of Debbie Stabenow, Bob Casey, Al Franken, Amy Klobuchar, Claire McCaskill, and Sherrod Brown. Sherrod Brown, I love Sherrod Brown. He's been on this program so many times. Al Franken was my colleague at Air America Radio. I know Al. Debbie Stabenow, her husband, helped start a lot of good progressive radio. I know Debbie. Amy Klobuchar, I've been in her home. I mean, these are Claire McCaskill and Bob Casey I've never met and I don't know. But, I mean, these are good, in my opinion, good, generally progressive Democrats. Why are, and the headline says, these 6 corporate Monsanto Democrats just sold out GMO labeling for campaign cash. What, and obviously it's not just these 6, but, and I don't want to be the circular firing squad that only eats my own. What the hell is going on here?
Okay. So a year ago, Vermont passed their law last year. They gave it a year to go into effect. That was what happened last Friday on July 1st. Very quickly after Vermont passed their law, the industry tried to knock it down in court. They sued the state of Vermont and said, you can't do this. That case never wrapped up, but the court didn't throw out Vermont's law. So when it seemed like the courts weren't going to work for them, the industry came to Washington And they went to Congress and they said states shouldn't be allowed to do this. This is too complicated. And they started a lot of hysteria. I mean, it's really been hysteria.
We're talking preemption here.
Exactly what it is.
You're going to, in violation of the 10th Amendment, you're going to preempt state laws.
And so a year ago, almost, I think it was mid-July, so almost a year ago, the House very easily, very quickly passed a bill that preempts any state laws on this. And it's really aggressive, flat-out preemption, terrible bill, unfortunately passed very easily. And we've been fighting about it in the Senate ever since. They took a shot at a bill that was not as bad as the House, but pretty bad preemption. They did that in March of this year in the Senate, and we were able to beat that back. I think you folks have seen me come talk to you. We were talking about that, and we did what it took. And some of those folks on that list were wrong in that vote. Some were right. Debbie Stabenow is the highest Democrat on the Agriculture Committee, and she's done this before. Unfortunately, she thinks it's her job to compromise. And this is what's been going on for 6 months. There's been these negotiations between the highest Republican, Pat Roberts from Kansas, and Debbie Stabenow from Michigan. And she's openly talked about how it was her job to find a solution to the problem of these state laws. Because when it came down to it, they bought this line from the industry. And they bought the line because they're very pressured and they're funded by the industry. And they said, we can't have states doing this. We have to have a national standard. And we've been fighting about the particulars ever since. What they passed last night, they're trying to say it's a labeling standard. It's so inadequate. It's not going to give people real labels.
So I understand from my conversation with you last evening on our TV show that this law that just passed, has it passed the Senate officially?
It passed the Senate around 11 p.m. last night.
Okay, so this law says that the Vermont law is dead, so you don't have to label GMOs anymore. The government, the USDA, has up to 2 years to figure out new standards. So for the next 2 years, GMO companies, you've got a complete reprieve. And then after that, instead of saying in plain English on a label, this product contains GMOs, you can put a little square block on there with all kinds of little squiggly lines in it that can only be read with a computer or a smartphone. And that will tell you whether or not, and it may say there's no GMOs, and it may say there is GMOs, because everything is going to have that little square on it. And the only way that you'd know is to walk down the supermarket aisle and scan
smartphone.
Every single product, which is crazy.
Which is not labeling. I mean, that's what we've been saying. When you listen to those folks on that sheet and the 54 others, or I can't do the math, but 50 some others who voted for this thing, unfortunately.
It was basically all the Republicans and these 6 Democrats?
Most of the Republicans. There were a handful of Republicans who didn't vote, and there were a handful who voted against it because they didn't like what it did to state laws, actually. Right. And there was one Republican who voted against it because he didn't think even a fake mandatory labeling standard was okay, because he's so against labeling. So he was there for strange reasons, but he was on the right side of the vote. So it gets crazy on ag and food issues. So, so the QR code piece, it gives the companies 3 options. We know they're going to take that QR code because they've been lobbying for it. They've been saying for months, we want to do this instead. And it just, I mean, when you peel back the layers of this bill, it just keeps getting worse. There's explicit language in the bill that says next to that code, the squiggly box, you cannot say the word GMO. It can only say for information, look at this code.
So you don't even know why the box is there.
Exactly. If you can use the box because you have a smartphone, you have a signal, and the patient's
I really should have had you on this program yesterday. I mean, so the Talkers Magazine says we have 2.75 million listeners. We should, we have shut down congressional offices many times by just asking people to call. Is it too late? Who should people call? What should they do?
So the next stage is, so the House passed one thing, the Senate passed another. They have to come up with some way to reconcile that. So the next move is in the House. They have 1 week next week before they go home for the summer. So there's going to be a lot of pressure to do this quickly. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to do it through some non-normal process, which is how they got it through the Senate. So that's the next move, is to tell your member of the House, whatever's coming at you from the Senate on GMO labeling, not good enough, vote against it. And, we're realistic about what the House looks like. So we're also preparing to make a lot of noise to the president that he should veto it.
Right. So you can call the congressional switchboard at 202-225-3121, 202-225-3121. If you're not sure who represents you in the House of Representatives, just give them your zip code, and they will connect. They will tell you who that person is, and they will connect you. And if you do know, of course, you can call up and say, hi, I want to talk to Peter DeFazio, and they'll put you right through. The White House comment line is 202-456-1111. You can let the president know what you think. I'm assuming going to foodandwaterwatch.org, you've got some sort of activism going on. We have just a minute left here, Patty. What other things should people be doing?
Those are the big ones. Also, these guys are home a lot. They're at home for the weekend. They've left D.C. So you're going to see them. And if you see them, they don't hear enough about this. They hear about other issues. They actually don't hear that much about food issues. And so they need to constantly be hearing, what have you done on labeling? The way this went down in the Senate was so ugly. Terrible process, terrible bill, done in secret, no hearings. It really adds insult to injury. And people should call them on that. This is not what people send their elected officials to Washington to do.
You could also call your senator and say, I'm really disappointed in what you did. Is this going to come back to the Senate? Is it going to come out of reconciliation and have to be revoted?
We're going to figure all this out in the next couple of days. I mean, they had to bust out procedures from 30 years ago in the Senate to get this done on this supposed emergency schedule. Oh, the parliamentarian was the star of the show last week because there was chaos on the floor when they were passing this. So we're just not quite sure what tricks they're going to pull.
Patty Lovera, the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch, food and waterwatch.org, the website. Check it out and call your member of Congress, your member of the House right now. Patty, thank you.
Thanks.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.